Hey, good morning, everyone, or afternoon. I wasn't going to go on camera today, so I was going to put this little image up on the screen instead of having me up there, but I kind of changed my mind. Hey, good morning, everyone, or afternoon. I'm going to go on stream. I wasn't going to go, and I'm going to change that because that was annoying having me in the background. So, anyways, let me set this up so I can see you guys and you can see me. And don't need that. Don't need that. All right, there we go. Hi, welcome. Yes, I'm having my coffee. Hair's still here. It's just pulled back, so don't trip. But anyways, so let me kind of give you a backstory of what kind of prompted this particular. I guess you could call it a hangout. I mean, people can join, so I put the link to join in the pin in the live chat. So if you want to come on in and talk about this, is fine. I've also got Paul in here somewhere. Paul, you there?
Hello.
Hello.
I am. Well.
So let me kind of give you a backstory, kind of prompt this. So on Twitter, I'm not going to say who, it really doesn't matter, but somebody was running the old atheist argument that they just had not heard any convincing definitions of God. Therefore, they don't believe. I've long written about my position on that being non-informative. That's not justificatory. That's not explaining anything, right? If somebody says, look, I don't have enough reason to believe, or I have insufficient reasons to believe, okay, well, I can kind of glean that from the fact that you don't believe, right? Because I would assume on conditions of rationality, if you had enough sufficient reasons to believe, you would believe something, right? I mean, you have cause and reasons to believe something and you don't. That seems to be irrational. So on pains of rationality, I can safely say that, look, if you don't believe certain things is true or certain things are false, it's because you don't have sufficient reason to. I could make an argument for that, at least an epistemic argument, right? So you're not telling me anything that you haven't heard some coherent definition of God in which you will say, yeah, I believe that, or I don't believe that, or I believe that's wrong. That's not an argument, right? I mean, sure, it lets people know that you are not convinced, but saying that I have no sufficient reason to believe as opposed to I'm not convinced are almost synonymous. They're pretty much telling the person the same thing for all practical purposes. So this person I was talking to was like, look, I'm not convinced because, I just haven't heard any definitions of God that I agree with. And I'm like, okay, but at this point, my argument back to them, and I was going to write a blog on this, but I decided not to. If you guys think that I should, let me know. If you don't care, let me know that too. I'm not going to waste my time on a blog if it's not that interesting of a topic. I think it particularly is, but I didn't know how to formulate it in a blog form. I thought there was more of a discursory type a topic to have on air rather than just a blog. Usually I write a blog and I'll talk about it on air, but I couldn't really get my thoughts together to put it as a blog form. So I apologize for that. But if you think it's translatable to a blog, let me know. So I was telling them, like, at this point, if you don't agree with a specific definition of God, then you're arguing truly semantics, right? You're not contesting the ontological arguments that God exists or not. You're not testing any kind of argument towards the existence of God, any kind of existential question. What you're doing is you're arguing what this object that is under evaluation of whether it exists or not is defined in a specific way. Well, that's a whole different argument, right? I mean, there's a lot of different variations of visions of God and things of that nature, right? If somebody believes in God and if you have two people who believe in God, you ask both of them for all the properties of God, they're not going to come up with the same things, right? You put 100 Christians in a room and 100 Muslims in a room and 100 Jews in a room, they're not going to come up with the same properties of God, right? Now, somebody could argue each version is a different God. Okay, that's fine. I think it's kind of nonsensical to do that, but whatever. But the definition of what you want to use, what you're asked for, if you believe that particular object exists or not, does it really matter in the big picture if we all have a conceptualization of what we've been talking about, the same thing that people have been talking about thousands of years, the great debate question? Does it really matter that they have a very specific property of God that maybe this group doesn't have? I mean, I speak in generalities when I'm talking about God existence because I just have a very basal stipulative definition of God, and I'll give it to you guys in a second. But to say that you haven't talked to anybody that gave you a coherent definition of God, I find to be a little bit disingenuous because if you don't know what they're talking about, how do you know what you're evaluating, right? How do you know if you're an atheist or not. You wouldn't even know what you believe or you don't believe, or what you believe is wrong, or you have no idea what they're talking about. Now, there are groups of people out there called atheists that's what they believe. They believe that there is no coherent definition to God, that you cannot even describe what God is. It's an incoherent concept. Therefore, any talk about that particular object is incoherent into itself. This is why a theological non-cognitivist would say that the proposition of God existing or not isn't an actual proposition, because it doesn't have any actual propositional content to be evaluated. It's incoherent. It's not talking about anything that is even understandable or defined in a way that we can understand. And that's fine for them. Now, I don't particularly, agree with atheists. A long time ago, I used to say I was a partial theological non-cognitivist, only because, I thought there was a point to be made there that, look, what is it that I'm being asked to evaluate here? What is the coherency of this object that may or may not exist? And I thought there was some value to it, but at the same time, later on, as I've learned, it's like, well, look, if you're just asking a proposition and you have a word, right, which is a signifier that has some semantic content that is assigned to that word. So you have a reference and you have a referent. So the reference is pointing to the object of the referent and saying, hey, does this particular object exist or not? And you can say, well, what is that object? Well, and that's fine. But when we're talking about the concept of a God, I think that most people have elevated the conversation to the point where they're no longer talking about specificities when it comes to a God. Is God, impassible? Is he has a deity? Does he have a son that's Jesus? Is he Jesus? I think all those questions are kind of irrelevant to the big picture. And so I'm going to give you guys my personal stipulative definition. Segment Fault uses this as well. He has it on his Twitter as pinned. So if you want to go check out Segmentation Fault. But this is something I came up with on my own. And it's just what I use arguendo when I'm talking about God for the most part, right? Again, does it have to be something that somebody adheres to? It doesn't have to be what you consider to be a God. But when I'm talking about a God, this is generally the most reductive, descriptive definition that I could probably come up with, right? Again, I wanted to be so broad that it really is just, do you believe this? This is all I'm giving a damn about. Do you believe this is the case, or you believe it's not the case? Or I have no position either way. So I say a God is a necessary being or agent with intentionality that all contingents are dependent upon and or can prescriptively change or suspend natural law by having complete dominion over an aspect of nature. Let me explain what I meant by this. Again, stipulative. Don't have to accept it. Doesn't matter. It's basically, when I'm talking about God in my blog, or I'm talking about God on my channels, this is the usage that I'm basically using, not specific to any kind of Yahweh or atomistic God or Adam God or whatever. What do you want to call the God of the Bible, right? Jacob, was it God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Yeah, Abrahamic gods, yes. And so that's a whole, people want to talk about specifically that. They want to say, look, do you believe in the Abrahamic God or not? That's fine. If you want to do a local God, I got no issue with that. Look, there's a lot of gods I think are BS, right? I just don't think Vishnu doesn't exist. I believe Vishnu doesn't exist, right? And so when it comes to the Catholic, version of religion, their versions of God, I not only don't believe in any of that, I think it's just wrong. I think I just believe it's BS. When it comes to young Earth creationism, I think that's BS. If that God is contingent upon a 7,000-year-old Earth, then that God doesn't exist. Why? Because we know the Earth is more than 7,000 years ago, older than that. Now, it'd be one thing if they said, "Look, it's a miracle that it looks so much older, but it's 7,000," like the Omphalos hypothesis, which is obviously not falsifiable. It's just basically last Wednesdayism or last Thursdayism. But God created the Earth with the appearance of age to fool us, which now you have a trickster God. So that doesn't make much sense to me either. But if that God didn't do it that way, if they say, look, the evidence is that the Earth is 7,000 years old, this God exists, and he created the Earth 7,000 years old with age of only 7,000 years, then you can say, look, that particular God that you're saying does this couldn't have done it this, because the Earth we know is much, much older. So I would say that particular God, if it is contingent upon the age of the Earth being young, does not exist. And I'm fine with that. These are arguments that I think atheists could easily make. When atheists say, well, you can't make an argument that God doesn't exist. Sure you can. Sure, you just make it as a probabilistic argument. That's all you're doing. So going back to, my discussion with this guy on Twitter, who's a friend of mine. I mean, he's a nice guy. And I did talk to him in private a little bit about it, but I was just like, look, if all you're saying is that you don't believe that some definition is the case, and now you're arguing what is the definition of God used in the proposition of God, does God exist, right? So you're arguing literally a semantic argument. You're not talking about atheism at that point. If you're saying atheism is merely just somebody who says, hey, I don't have a coherent definition of God, therefore I don't believe, you're not talking about atheism at that point. You're talking about a poor definition of God, right? If you just say, hey, God is, a necessary being alone, that's a poor definition of God, because, well, we don't know whether a necessary being exists or not. And I don't mean by a being that has intentionality or an agent. I'm just saying something that must exist. Quantum fluctuations could be a necessary being. This was a mistake that Aaron Ra made when he was talking about this particular topic with those Muslims. He didn't understand what they were talking about. A necessary being does not have to mean something with a mind. This means a necessary thing that must exist in all possible worlds, right? The law of identity must exist in all possible worlds. It is a mandatory thing. It cannot fail to exist in any possible world. At least, the concept of it, right? We describe it by the actual formalization of the law of identity, but it has to be hold true in all possible worlds. So I don't know whether necessary being or not is necessary. I don't know if there has to be something. Now, it seems like maybe there does, but at the same time, what would it mean to have something that must exist in all possible worlds as opposed to just nothingness? What would be a universe without anything, right? There's a thing out there for all possible world theory that actually is there an empty world? Is there a world that exists of absolutely nothing? Because it is possible. It's logically possible. It's not maybe nomologically possible. We have no idea if the laws of physics even allow that, but we know that it is logically possible. If it's logically possible, it must be the case in one possible world, there's an empty world. And so if there's an empty world, that means there's nothing necessary in that world. But that can't be, because there has to be necessary things that exist in all possible worlds. So it's a little confusing how that works. And I haven't quite worked out in my head what an empty world would be. UKPI for £2. Thank you, UKPI. I know God exists. I have a mirror in my bathroom. That's called egotism. And it's. I don't think you can control the aspects of nature. I tell you what, if you can control an aspect of nature, I might consider you for godhood. How about you, Paul? You follow on? And we got Rez in here, I heard, too.
Yeah, hello. I'm following along. For instance, I'm the god. When you use a certain account on Meets, I'm the god of that account.
Yeah, you have power, but I wouldn't put you as the type of God that we're talking about as far as the question of does God exist, right? Which again goes to the point of the hangout. What do people mean by God? So I put on here necessary being or agent with an intentionality. So that means I want to know if something exists that must exist in all possible worlds that has agency, that has intelligence, that has the ability to make decisions, which is intentionality, right? It has intentional states. Beliefs are intentional states. It's an intentional verb. You have to believe in something, right? You believe this, you believe that. Whatever that is, that makes belief an intentional state, because you cannot have a belief without a belief content. You have to believe in something. You have to think about something. These are all intentional words. So I said that all contingents are dependent upon, which means that everything that exists that doesn't have to exist by necessity is contingent upon something else, at least in most people's perspective in philosophy, for the principle of sufficient reason, that anything that's caused has something that it came from. Now, this may not always hold true in quantum and physics, and I get that, but philosophically speaking, we're talking about contingents, which means that it must exist in at least one possible world, but not all of them, because then it would be necessary. So you get into a modal collapse if everything contingent becomes necessary, that you actually get a modal collapse. So something that's contingent will exist in at least one, but not all possible worlds. And so all contingents, do they flow from one necessary being? Do all contingents come from something that must exist? If not, you have an infinite chain of regression of causal things, right? And that might just be an infinite regress, or it might just be a brute fact that exists that we don't know what the original contingent thing is, right? That contingent thing might just have a brute fact that it exists. We don't have any reason to understand why. Maybe we can't understand why. Maybe it's outside of our epistemic limits. Our minds are biologically hardwired in a specific way that it may not be able to even apprehend certain things. And I believe that very strongly. I believe that because of biological restrictions, our minds are prohibited from understanding certain things. In fact, the ability to even apprehend itself is pretty amazing. But I do think that there are things that are outside our epistemic we can't process it. Our minds are not set up that way. Maybe if we had some different line of evolution, maybe, but I don't think the brain is capable of understanding certain concepts. Like, again, what would it mean to be outside time and space, right? That concept is outside of our ability to comprehend. Even when we're talking about dimensionals, higher dimensions, you've got to break it down in mathematic forms, because trying to visualize higher dimensions, our brains can't do, at least not very well, right? Because we're third-dimensional objects. It's hard to hard to imagine fourth and fifth and higher dimensions, even though we can do it just fine in mathematics. And or prescriptively change or suspend natural law by having complete dominion over an aspect of nature. And I just threw that in there to include all the pantheonic type gods, right? Norse and Greek and what a Celtic, whatever god of your choices. Most of them have some kind of aspect of nature they have dominion over, right? Whether it be lightning, whether it be the sun, whether it be the moon, or something they can either prescriptively change the law, making, hey, look, I don't want this law to be this, I want it to be something else, or at least suspend the laws of nature, right? That I wouldn't. If somebody said, hey, I'm a god, I can control lightning and thunder and change the weather, like, Storm from X-Men. That's pretty much godlike power to me, right? I mean, I'm gonna put that as a minor god. It doesn't have to be like a full god as far as like the creator god, but I'm gonna put it as some type of god. But that's just me. What do you think about that? Go ahead.
Yeah, that small g god.
Yeah, small g. God. Yeah, I didn't put big G on here, but whatever. I mean, the big G, I usually reserve big G for the creator God. Now, other people do it for the Christian God, and I'm totally fine with that. I get that. But myself, when I'm using the big G, I'm kind of more asking, look, do you believe there's a creator being? Right? That's what I really want to know when I talk to people. Do you believe there's a creator being that created everything? If you believe that there is, I'm going to put that under theism. If you believe that there's not, I'm going to put that under atheism. If you have no position either way, I'm going to put it under agnosticism. You may want to call it atheism. That's fine for you. I'll call you that too, but it's philosophically agnosticism. So that's what I'm asking for, right? And so when I was talking to my friend on that question, why he didn't feel like there was any kind of coherent way to describe God, then I was like, well, what are you atheist toward, right? And he finally told me, I believe there's no gods. And I'm like, okay, so you do have some kind of concept. And I think the most basic thing is we're asking is there a creator God? Did something necessary with intelligence and agency create everything that exists? That's really the question I want to know if I'm asking somebody about what they believe. But what do you guys think? What do you guys think when you guys are asking a theist, first and foremost, generalized, what is it that you believe? If you believe there's a creator God, then you can start going down the side paths, the winding roads of, okay, is this a Christian version? Is this a Muslim version? Is this a Hindu version? Is this a Jewish version? What flavor do you want of your God? And what attributes are you attributing to that particular God? Because I personally believe that we have never discovered any attribute of a God. Because if we had discovered an attribute of a God, we would know gods exist, right? So we only can ascribe these attributes to a deity. Everything we've ever learned about a God, I think, has been learned through man. I mean, think about it. I'm not going to try to pull this, let's talk about leprechauns or tooth fairy nonsense. But there is something to be said in fictionalism when it comes to propositions dealing with fictitious creatures and fantastic creatures, like, let's say, like Superman, right? And everything we've ever learned about Superman has been told to us. We don't go out finding things about Superman. We don't go looking and say, hey, what can we find about this particular object that it has the abilities to do this? Did we discover Superman can fly? No, we were told that. Did we discover Superman had, heat vision? No, we were told that. Everything we've ever been discussing about a God has been told to us by a person. Now, somebody could say, "Oh, well, God told them," and okay, that's fine. That might, may or may not be the case. But as far as you telling somebody else, we're always getting things through other people, right? If somebody wants to claim direct revelation, that's a whole different concept. It's a whole different topic. But as far as what people hear about God online, it's through other people. And I got to tell you, people will believe things just by repetition. People say things. We see it all the times in these communities. People will come up with something and run with it. It has no evidence whatsoever. And all of a sudden it becomes, oh, did you hear this? I guess it's fact. Well, okay. Well, where'd you hear that from? And where's the evidence for that? Oh, there's none. But rumors promulgate on the internet. Same thing when it comes to religion, I think. I think people just wanted to come up with something, and they wanted to have some ideas about what they think this particular properties of God are, if God is a necessary being with intentionality that created everything. What are his properties? And so I think a lot of the denominations just kind of got into fights with each other because they're saying, no, we want this God to have this property, and we want this God to have this property. We think God wants you to do this. We think God wants you to do this. But you know what? It's still always somebody telling us what God wants. So I think that when it goes back to all these discussions is people need to reel it in and not get hung up on what does it mean by God? Oh, I haven't been told a definition of God that I believe in. Okay, fine. But I just want to know, do you believe the universe was created by a being? If not, do you believe there's no such being that can create? I don't really want to know so much what you don't believe. I want to know what you do believe. Now, it's fine sometimes that why you don't believe something is actually of importance, right? If I say, X equals X, then you say, I don't believe you, Steve. I'm going to look at you kind of like, what? Why? Why don't you believe me on that? Because that's, simple math, and it's the law of identity. All of X equals X. That's pretty well one of the most foundational rules of logic out there, if not probably the most foundational rule of logic, is the law of identity. And you don't believe it. I want to know why, right? I mean, those are kind of questions I think are appropriate to ask. Well, do you have reasons not to believe that? Well, I just haven't been convinced that the math is right. Well, I know you haven't been convinced the math is right if you think that the law of identity is wrong. I want to know why you think it's wrong. Not that you're not convinced. What is it about what you've heard about the law of identity that has led you down this weird, strange, irrational path to say that the law of identity isn't true? So you have to have reasons to even fail to affirm the law of identity is true. Because if you sit there and say, like, I don't believe the law of identity, I'm sorry, you're going to look kind of dumb. You're going to look kind of not quite there, right? There's going to be problems with that to anybody you're having a rational discussion with if you can't even affirm the law of identity. So in that particular case, not believing something is of consequence, right? It's more than just, I don't believe God exists. It's, I don't believe something that is well established as factually as you can get. I mean, it's mathematics. You can't get much more foundational than X equals X, can you? So that's my little diatribe on that. And it kind of bothered me because I'm like, dude, stop arguing what you think, about definitions of God. That's arguing now atheism is based on semantics. It's no longer based upon ontological questions of God's existence. And just keep it simple, people. Look, if you talk to a theist, what is it you really wanting to know from them? You want to know if they just believe that there's something that exists that created everything, because in the Islamic sector, those guys, that's what they really start off with, right? Their whole shtick is first getting people to recognize that, in their opinion, that there's a being that has to exist. We have somebody who's joining us. Hi, Jennifer. Hello. Oh, did they leave? Did I run them off already?
Oh, they're here.
Oh, hi. Can you hear us?
Mic that might not be working.
Well, okay. We'll see what they have to say when they get their mic working. But let me get back to my live chat here real quick. So what do you guys think on that? I mean, do you guys agree that this argument that atheism is merely the non-acceptance of God, that they have not heard a particular definition, therefore they don't believe? Because that's not an argument for atheism. That's an argument for some kind of semantic argument towards.
Yeah, no, that's what's called a cop-out.
It really is. Yeah, I think it is a cop-out because, again, we already know you haven't found a particular God that you believe exists, or else you would be a theist, right? You're not a theist. I know you're not. And so it's obvious that you haven't found any particular God that you are convinced exists, right? Rez?
I mean, yeah, but there's there's several levels of it. For example, just one of the reasons why I don't believe there are any gods is, okay, even if you could answer the question, is there a God, and you could come to that conclusion, then you have to say which God is real among the thousands of religions.
I agree with that, but don't you think?
And you could only come to that conclusion for the sake of the argument, because I don't think you can even reach the conclusion to say definitively there is a God.
Yeah, no, and I don't have an issue with that. But here's the thing, though. Don't you think it would be of high importance to even get to the first step to there is a God? I mean, regardless of what that type of God it is, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Whatever the nuances of that God is, just the starting point of saying, hey, look, we have discovered a God, or God has spoken to all of man. We all know that he exists now, contrary to the theists out there who say, well, all men know of God in their heart, which I think is complete nonsense. But let's say that everybody did know God exists, right? That would be the single greatest event in the history of mankind, bar none, right? If everybody knew, because even back then, I don't think everybody kind of knew. I mean, maybe if there was two people, Adam and Eve supposedly would have been the only two people at one time that knew on the face of the earth. But of course, I believe Adam and Eve are non-existent things. They didn't exist. They never did exist. I gotta fix my lighting there. Oh, that's good right there. All right, so I think we have somebody come in that want to jump in and say something. Who's this?
Hi, Steve. My name's Jen.
Hi, Jen. Are you the Church of Entropy?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think actually you and I were maybe supposed to do a debate on something on Modern Day Debate, but that hasn't been finalized yet. But I'm more of a conversation person than a debate person, but it's great to meet you.
Okay. So James did message me, and I think it was probably you, because you have a channel, right? A YouTube channel?
Yeah.
I
do excruciatingly, painfully long, incredibly detailed stuff that
you have some woo-woo stuff though, right?
Some woo-woo stuff?
Yeah, do you do like is it crystals or something?
I've talked about light crystals, but as it turns out, that's actually been validated by science, what you call empiricism. So
you do the quantum stuff, right?
That's my main thing, but I've been branching into this metaphysical stuff because that's actually my main topic of interest, like philosophy and metaphysics. So I wanted to hop on because the topic you're discussing right now is fascinating to me.
Thank you. I like to have engaging topics. I like and subscribe, people. Yeah, by the way, I'm gonna start promoting the hell out of this channel starting next week, and I will be doing some fundraising and some other stuff. I'm gonna be streaming a lot. I'm promoting because I got to pay legal stuff. So I'm gonna try to have these types of hangouts more often, talking about a particular topic like this, because I find them enjoyable as well. I think that there's not enough intelligent dialogue on these particular topics, because all people have is the atheist experience where they just you're a theist, let me hang up on you. But anyways, go on. So yeah, he did ask me to have a discussion with you, and I was like, yeah, okay, so, seems legit. I just don't want to have debates any longer. I don't mind hosting or moderating debates.
It's too tiring, isn't it?
Right?
It's too tiring, isn't it? It's like
especially if it's on Modern Day Debate. But we're not going to get into that.
I love James. I do got to do more debates on this channel. I'm going to be doing a moderating something in like 2 weeks on another channel. It's 2 LDS and 2 Presbyterians, and they want me to moderate as a neutral person. I'm like, okay. So I want to do more moderations on other channels, and also have more debates on here. But it's been rough trying to find people who really debate for that very reason, because they've gotten boring lately. Actually, quite some time ago. So yeah, I'd rather have a discussion. So yeah, talk to me about your metaphysical stuff, because I think you were, like you said, you were relating like some quantum stuff, which, by the way, I don't know much about quantum mechanics, but I want to know how you were relating it to metaphysics and stuff.
Do you mind if we talk about your definition of God first?
Oh, sure. No, knock yourself out. Yeah, go for it.
I really wanted to come in and assist your show. And so intentionality, I thought this was a typo. My bad. It actually does mean something, but I looked it up and it is unclear what it means.
Okay, so there's...
I guess what I'm asking, sorry, is that what is the sense of the sentence if we remove with intentionality versus if it's in?
All right. Actually, you know what? I think I probably should put that as a T, not an S. This is intentionality with a T, not an S. I think that's a typo there. Because I'm actually going to fix that right here.
The people in your chat, and it's good to you have vigilant chat. I got to say, you actually have an awesome audience. So congrats on that. It's tough to get a toxic audience, but yeah, they thought it was the one with the S, which actually does mean something.
Yeah, it does, and I'll explain what that means in a second.
I can't tell what it is.
Okay, well, I'll explain it. Okay, intentionality with an S is a very difficult type of thing to explain. Intentionality means that, for example, if I have a coextensive term, that means that two things mean something, and I'm not able to take something out of a sentence and have it change. Well, let me explain. Intentionality is hard to explain. Let's say I have like Superman can fly, okay? And if I say Clark Kent can fly, those are two different statements. And if I replace Clark Kent with Superman, even though they're the same object, the propositional value can change. It's not transparent. It's opaque. So you have an intentionality issue there, because even though you're referencing the same object, Superman can fly is not the same thing as Clark Kent can fly. Okay. Well, actually, excuse me. I should say. Let me rephrase that. It's Lois Lane can believe Clark Kent can fly versus Lois Lane can believe Superman can fly. Those are very two different propositions, because Lois Lane can believe Superman can fly, correct? And that make it true. But as soon as I change Superman to Clark Kent, that proposition now becomes false. It's non-transparent. So when we're talking about intentionality, we're talking about things like what's called de re and de dicto. Have you heard of that?
I just want to, real quick before you go on, so it sounds like the truth depends, in this Clark Kent example, truth depends not on what's objectively true, but what people know about what's true.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And exactly. And even with the de re de dicto, if I say, I believe somebody is following me, right? That is two usages, de re and de dicto. One of them would be, I believe somebody's following me, as in I have somebody in mind that, let's say you're following me. It is true that if you're following me, somebody is following me, and I have you in mind, meaning that I'm referring to you in when I say somebody is following me. Or it could just be a general statement, somebody is following me. I have no idea who, but in which case, in one particular case, I can take somebody and I can replace it with Jen, right? That is Jen, right? Right?
Yes, it's Jen.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, it's
I
Jen.
can replace it with, you can't see me gesticulate because you don't have my camera on the inside. So I can replace somebody with Jen, and the propositional value doesn't change, right? If I believe it's you following me, I can say Jen is following me, or I can say someone is following me, and the propositional value is true. But if I don't have an idea that it's you and some general thing, and I just say somebody's following me, and they put your name in, then it doesn't hold true any longer. So there's different ways of looking at these propositional things, and so intentionality has to do with that, with an S. And also with math, you can have a set that has extensional with an X, or intentional. And so if I say all n of elements of n, right, which would be all the natural numbers, that's intentional. But if I want an extensional with an S, I would have a set that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and enumerate them. Same thing by just saying intentional state, I can say, or set, I can say all the presidents of the United States. Or I can have an extensional one with an S and list every single president of the United States. Both those sets are equivalent, but one is enumerated where I have all the presidents in it, and the other one I just say all the presidents of the United States. Those are equivalents in sets, but one is extensional, one is intentional. Does that make a little more sense?
It does. Okay. I have a background in like actual theoretical math and physics, so the way we call that is implicit and explicit.
Yeah, that's same thing. Yeah, I've heard those terms exactly used the same way. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly the same.
I also wanted to comment on what you said about the law of identity. In math, we would call that trivial, so it would be unfalsifiable. But it isn't clear what it means, and it could easily be used to make something not true seem true.
Yeah, I mean, it's a trivial case.
It's actually, do you know what I mean by, I mean, I should say tautological. It's always true that X equals X.
Well, that's all identities are tautologically true because they're true by,
so there's
you
no
can replace
point
it with
in
anything that's
saying
going to
it.
hold true. Yeah.
There's no point in even asserting it.
It depends.
No point in asserting tautologies.
I mean, the thing is if, let's say you didn't know math, right? Let's say like, hey, Paul, you there? Paul? Oh, Rez, you there?
Yep.
All right, Rez, let's say you sucked at math. You're a math sucker. Yeah.
But go on.
So I want to explain to you something like the law of identity. In which case, I'm trying to convince you that it's true because you don't know anything about it. I am asserting it to be the case, right? Even though it's trivial and it's a tautology, but there's a lot of tautologies out there that we may not recognize. I mean, I can give you a PQ thing, and it could be, pretty substantial. And unless you evaluate it, you're not going to know if it's tautological or not until you look at the truth table. So
you're saying a tautology is actually not the end of the world then? It may not be bad for something to be tautological.
I have no problem. We have tautologies all the time. People don't even recognize how many things are tautological. Like if I go outside and I say I went outside to see the morning sunrise, that's a tautological statement because the sunrise only comes out in the morning. That's a tautology. Things like that are tautological. So we see a lot of.
No, it's redundant. That's redundant.
It's
tautological is I am Jen, or I could just say, like it's self-evident that I'm myself. It's a question of what is not tautological or what's non-trivial, which is what we call in math when something's interesting for purposes of education, is what is it that makes something not equal to something?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. But in grammar, what I said was, like I said, if I say I'm going out to watch the morning sunrise, that is considered a grammar a tautology. Not exactly the same as in math, obviously, but a trivial case, like most time in math, when you have like 1 x equals 1 is a trivial solution for a lot of different types of mathematics. So you're right. It's like, when does this not hold? Matter of fact, the shortest paper I think ever written in math I saw not too long ago, and it had to do with Euclid's fifth power, something like a to the fifth, b to the fifth, plus c to the fifth, plus d to the fifth equals e to the fifth or something. And there was a conjecture, and the whole paper was just one instance of that conjecture being false, showing we have found a counterexample to Euclid's postulate. This is it. Suck it. Here's our name. There you go. That's all it was. It was
that's when Socratizing actually does work, if you find that one counterexample.
Right?
Have you heard of something called the identity of indistinguishables?
Yeah, that's Leibniz's law. The identity of indistinguishables or indistinguishables of identity. They're very similar, but one states that if you have all the same properties of two different objects and those properties are identical, and the other one states that if you have two identical things, they're going to have the same properties. And it's all obviously in first order logic, but yep. It's a more advanced form of law of identity. I've actually written about that in my blog, by the way.
Cool. I'll have to check it out. I noticed you also asked about what stuff exists outside of time and space.
Mm-hmm.
Like love.
Yeah, I don't think time has a chronological property to it, right? I mean, do I think love exists? Yes. Do I think that a lot of things that have abstractions to them, is it helpful to think of them as something with concreteness or hypostantiation to say they exist? Yes.
No, it's not. It's actually it hurts to do that because it's not true.
I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do. I mean, if you're familiar with Quine's indispensability theory, theorem or thesis, he makes a good argument that science uses mathematics, and for that to really work, you have to treat mathematics as concrete objects. You have to treat them as something that has
that presupposes that concrete is more real than non-concrete.
Well, again, but more real. Are we talking about existential-wise? To take up,
which is again a self-referential circular definition. So it's been defined to be self-affirming, begging the question.
Well, I don't think it's a.
You're saying, well, there can't be anything
definition
outside of materialism because materialism is all there is.
No, but if something has time, look, when we say something has existence, there's two ways of looking at that, right? There's one way of looking at it to say it takes up space and time, but it has spatial temporal components to it, right? Would you agree that means it exists? If it takes up space time, then it exists.
Your body is a space time event to some extent because it has a beginning and it'll have an end. For all intents and purposes, the constituent atoms they'll go on. But Steve McRae, am I saying that right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He's got a finite shelf life as far as his body is concerned.
Yeah, I'll give it about 3 more days.
Therefore, that's temporary. But the idea of love is something that people can fall in and out of, and sort of a cheesy example, but it exists separate from the material things that.
Right, but it's conceptualized, right? One can say that we obviously know that there's hormones and chemicals that are involved with love, right? The love hormone, right? Oxytocin. What is it? Not oxycodone, but
I think it's oxytocin.
Oxytocin, yeah, oxytocin. Yeah, I knew that. So
yeah, at this point, I'm pretty sure hasn't love already been essentially quantified?
Yeah, well, to some
degree.
Correlates
of love.
I mean, the sensation, right? The qualia is not the same as the name we're giving that particular feeling, right?
Like we roughly know what goes on in the brain when people claim to be experiencing love.
We know it's based upon chemical reactions, right? We cannot experience those things without those chemicals, which I think is notable to say that there is a materialistic underpinning, right?
That makes the chemicals necessary, not necessarily sufficient.
Well, it makes them necessary. Yeah, I'm not going to argue that it has sufficiency. Yeah, I'm not going to go that far because I'm not a materialist. But I will say that it is necessary for those emotions to occur, which may lead to sufficiency. I can't make that argument that they're sufficient, right?
I found the problem with sufficiency argument, the one that consciousness comes from the brain. Mm-hmm. If you agree that the brain has an ordering principle, which it does because it has an axis of symmetry at least, and probably more because it has fractalization, then you're saying that there's a self-arising order in the brain. If you agree consciousness is ordered and the brain is ordered, you're saying it's self-arising from the brain.
Not necessarily,
which is ex nihilo creation. Not you. I'm just. It's my question. It's my comment on the argument.
The thing I have with that is, okay, it goes back to the hard problem of consciousness. You know,
I love that you said that, Steve, because every freaking conversation does.
No, really, that's a foundation, right? I mean, I think that's one of the most perplexing things in philosophy is the hard problem of consciousness, and I think people underestimate that particular argument, or arguments about that. What is consciousness emergent? Is it more of along the lines of non-reductive physicalism? I tend to more what's called property dualism, but the fact that the mind can actually apprehend itself to some capacities. The mind can ask its questions about itself, but can the mind make physical changes? Right? I do believe that physical things affect mental states. Right? I as a property dualist, the physical states will affect your mental states. I don't think anybody will disagree that you change the chemistry of the mind or the physical. If you get a head injury or something like that, it'll change mental states. The question to me more is, one, what's the mechanism by which that occurs? We don't know. And two, can a mental state change a physical state? Because I think that's the most interesting question. How does an idea, right? If I think to myself, I want to move my hand, right? I want to move my hand like this. And you can't see it, but if you look outside, I'm moving my hand back and forth. My brain is saying, I want to do that, and it's actually happening. Although we kind of recognize that we want to do something before a conscious mind knows about it. So I might have already made a decision to move my hand. It may have already started moving before I even thought about making the decision to move my hand. It's like 400 milliseconds they determine. There's a little delay there. That to me is impressive. How our thoughts get converted that way. What's that?
The spookier thing is like when we make decisions and when we think we make decisions. They've done research where they're monitoring people's brainwaves while they're in the process of making a decision, and that basically the decision gets made, then there's a rationalization of the decision, mm-hmm. and then it gets asserted, and mm-hmm. people think that the rationalization is the quote free will, but they got causality backwards.
Well, that's their internal dialogue going, is this the appropriate thing to do? I think a lot of our decisions our brain makes for us, and we don't even think twice about it, and we just recognize it after the fact. I think it does most of the heavy lifting behind the scenes. I mean, can you imagine if we had
coming to a decision is typically you becoming aware of a decision you've already made.
Right. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine if our brains had to put to the conscious every little detail about everything? I mean, we're processing stuff all over the place. Look, I have a cup in my hand. My brain automatically recognizes it's a cup. My subconscious recognizes a cup. I know what a cup is. I can tell you what a cup does. I know all about this particular cup because I've had this cup for a very long while. My brain has done all that for me. I don't have to actively do it every single time I see this cup. It's already there. My brain recognizes it, and I have an object that I believe exists, right? I believe there's a concrete object that has an existential property to it. Now, when it comes to concepts like love and mathematics, I don't think they have physical concreteness to it. I think that they're abstracts, but is it helpful to treat an abstract as concrete? There's an argument to have for that. It's called like mathematical Platonism. There's a strong argument for that. I do tend to more what's called nominalism because I'm just a lazy thinker, but I could be convinced for mathematical Platonism probably. I don't have an issue against it. But
mathematics is already Platonistic in its manner of thinking.
To some degree, because we use it in science. I mean, what would it mean if numbers didn't exist? I mean, if you say, look, 1, 2, 3.
It's not about that. It's about how do they exist. Like, it's not about A equaling A. It's how does A not equal B? Well, at what point does A stop being A and become B?
Do you think that they exist in some kind of Platonic realm?
Well, I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about it, and I've been sort of holding back on answering because it's caused a lot of drama. But I think the problem in answering the question and the way it's phrased right now is that we don't distinguish between logic, the language, and logic, the idea, because our logic isn't really transcendental in any meaningful sense. Like, we can't use our logic to go and figure out the answer to questions. We can sort of speculate within a range, but it's like I was thinking Bayesian statistics and law of excluded middle, those things seem to not be compatible in any way but a trivial one, because according to excluded middle, something's either 0% true or 100% true. And Bayesian statistics is saying that there's a probabilistic range over which something could be true. That's a contradiction. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but can somebody explain this to me? Because I'm like,
I think I know where you're going with it. Okay, so the law of excluded middle, that specifically applies to propositions, right? In classical logic, right? Now, other forms of logic, they don't necessarily have the law of excluded middle, right? I mean, you can look at what's called truth. Ever heard of truth gluts, and glutes?
I've heard of the principle of an explosion of truth. Is that the same thing?
The principle of explosion is basically when you have, if you allow for a contradiction, you can prove anything, right? I forget the Latin.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, do you agree that there's something between a contradiction and the law of identity? Like, is there anything between those two things?
Well, okay. So, let me go back to this real quick. So, the law of excluded middle doesn't have to exist in many forms of logic. You can have a truth glut where you can have, or glute where you have either. Well, one is where you have a proposition neither is true or false, and the other one where it can be both. I think one is neither true and false. I think the other one is both true and false, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember which one's which. But
anytime you can engineer a situation where something and its opposite can both be deduced from axioms,
then you have
a situation where you can prove anything true.
Yeah, what is it, qubit? Principalis ex qubit, I believe there's a term for it, or something like that. My Latin sucks. But there's a form of logic called diatheistic logic or paraconsistent logic, where you can have logic that allows for the principle of explosion, or allows for contradictions, true contradictions, without principle of explosion. But there are very rare instances of when you can have.
Well, we would need an example of that, because I'm not sure I'm ready to agree with that, because it does appear that on an intuitive level there is something about the principle of non-contradiction that is indeed true. I'm not saying that any of the versions we've got going right now are it, but doesn't
if you go to my blog, I wrote an example of a married bachelor, right? The canonical thing for married bachelors as a non-married man, or a bachelor as a unmarried man, is based upon analytical distinctions, right? It's an analytical proposition. But with paraconsistent logic, you can actually have an example of a married bachelor. And this is straight from, I took it right from Stanford Encyclopedia. So I didn't come up with the example myself. I gave full credit to the Stanford Encyclopedia, but I explained it. And one of the examples is basically, you're out at sea, you're getting married, you're 2 miles off the coast, into one person's, one territory's water. You're pronounced man and wife, but just as you're pronouncing man and wife, you leave the waters of that one country, So now you're no longer married. So as you're passing, you're in a state of ditheism where you're married in one country but not another. So you're an unmarried bachelor. So that
isn't this essentially the ship of Theseus but reworded?
No, but the ship of Theseus is when you're talking about Mariology, right? You're saying, hey, when does a ship no longer be a ship? If I start removing components to the ship, is it still the same ship? If people look at a ship and say, look, I'm going to remove one plank and put another plank in, it's still the same ship. But if I remove, half the planks, is it still the same ship? If I remove all the planks and put it back together with different planks, is it still the same ship? When does it stop becoming what it is? And this is a hard question for Mariologicalism.
I think it also depends on for what reason you're going to be describing it as the same ship, because from a historical point of view, even if you have, say, 10 fragments of equal size and matter, nobody in their right mind would call that a ship from a practical sense, but from a historical point of view, they would still call it the same ship because it has historical value.
Yeah, I agree. But the one way, it sucks, but one of the ways to get out of what's called Mariological nihilism is to just admit, you don't get out of it, you have to embrace it, that objects don't exist. That all objects are just consisting of primitives, which would in this case be like atoms. So this cup, in a Mariological nihilistic point of view, would be this cup doesn't really exist. What it is just a bunch of atoms that do exist that are in the shape of a cup. And one way to look at it would be, think about an ink dot matrix printer. If you print out something with a dot matrix printer, it just has little dots in it. But if you have an image, you can see an image in it. But does that image really exist? Well, it only really exists because our minds process it as an image. If our minds did not apprehend it, would there still be an image there to apprehend? To me, if you really, really, had to ask me, is there an image there if there's no one there to see it as an image, is a hard question to answer. Because
sort of like the face on Mars.
Well, we know that was like tricks of lighting, right? We know that the whole Richard C. Hoagland Enterprise thing was BS, and he'll never admit that. But yeah, it's the same thing. Is our brains process that? So is there a face on Mars? Well, no.
Yeah, I forget what the name is of like that.
Pareidolia.
Sort of process. Yes,
pareidolia.
Thank you.
Pareidolia. It's pareidolia is the effect that we see for recognizing faces. There's also another one for data called apophenia.
No. I was speaking of like just general pattern recognition.
That's apophenia.
There you go.
Yeah. The Magic Skeptic for £5 says, God cannot be the author of laws of logic. If God doesn't exist, it would be false to say God does. This is the law of non-contradiction. Well, no, thank you, Magic Skeptic. The law of non-contradiction just basically says that the proposition cannot be true and false at the same time. Right? It has to be one or the other. Now, whether we know what it is a different question. That's when you get into multi-value logics where you can say true, false, or you, which is unknown. But we have these laws of logic which are descriptive in nature. We have discovered them. Do they exist in all times and all places, some kind of transcendental? Who the hell knows? That's one of the arguments that theists will have, saying that, look, these are transcendental. They exist as concepts. And if they exist in concepts at all times and all places, there must be a mind that has them for eternity, right? That's the whole argument for a transcendental argument for God. And all a transcendental argument really is if this exists, then if this is the necessary precursor for that, and this exists, then that must exist, right? If I say that X is a necessary precursor for Y, and Y exists, then I automatically know X exists because it's a necessary condition for Y to be.
Isn't that just presuppositionalism with extra steps, though?
No, it's not. No, you're not presupposing anything. You're working backwards. You're not presupposing anything.
You're definitely presupposing a lot of things, and I can definitely prove it to you.
Oh, I presuppose a lot of things. But transcendental is not presuppositionism. Transcendental.
Yes, it is. You're presupposing every single definition of God and every single conditional for God being perfect.
But that's something completely
not you,
irrelevant.
but the people who are doing that are.
I mean, people can have other presuppositions, but if I'm not, everybody has presuppositions coming into any discussion, because you even to have a discussion, you have to presuppose a person understands English. You have to understand the person understands what a variable is. You have all these presuppositions every conversation. But when I say X is a necessary precondition for Y, if Y exists, then X must exist. That's not a presuppositional argument. That is a transcendental argument, because one is necessary for the other to exist, and if the other exists, then the necessary condition must have already been met. If I say, in order for you to die, you must have been born, or you must have lived. I should say that for you to die, you must have lived. If you die, then it proves that you have lived, because you cannot have died unless you had lived. So living is a necessary precondition for dying. That's a transcendental argument, right? But presuppositionalism is completely different. Well, presuppositional
transcendental and presuppositional, those are different things.
Yes.
In your view.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, a presupposition would be we exist. The universe is real. We can observe the universe and draw inference from it. Those are all presuppositions. I'm a classical foundationalist when it comes to properly basic beliefs. I just take it as we have properly basic beliefs. We can build upon those to gain knowledge. But those properly basic beliefs themselves are not justifiable. They're not something you can rationalize. But without them, you can't function. They're something that everybody has to kind of accept, or you just can't function in society. I mean, if you didn't accept that other people existed, how would you function in society? You'd be talking to yourself.
There's an argument to be made that society doesn't work.
Nothing, but I mean, I think most.
I'm just teasing. It does sound dreadful, doesn't it? That's the same argument as like, there's only God's will, so free will can't be real because there's only one will.
Yeah, I kind of have an issues with some of those free will arguments as well, but that's a entirely different thing. And I don't really particularly have a fond position on free will, because I tend to compatibilism, but compatibilism sucks. But so does hard determinism, so does libertarian free will. There's no position when it comes to free will that makes sense to me. It's just the lesser of the evils, because they all suck. They really do. If you really look at free will arguments, none of them are any good for compatibilism, determinism, hard determinism, or for libertarian free will, which I outright deny. I do not think we have libertarian free will.
I've basically said the exact same thing, so it is quite lovely to hear.
Are you more of a soft compatibilist?
Well, I have more or less the answer, because I, obviously deny that it's possible to violate God's laws, aka the laws of physics.
Mm-hmm.
But I also agree that basically everything you said is correct. That compatibilism blows or sucks. I forget which one.
No, I can't argue with that.
And another thing I agree on is, I'm not sure if you word exactly like this, but I literally said this yesterday, like free will, even if we conclusively disprove it, whatever that means, it ain't going away, because it's a useful construct.
Yeah, the way I kind of describe libertarian free will is more of a thought experiment. I'm sure my people listening have heard this a million times, but you may not have. So the way I describe it is this: a libertarian free will would be epistemically be whole and to agree with this. I think if you made a decision, let's say Jen made it. Sorry, I'm getting confused here. Jen, right? Is Jen right? I don't know why.
Yeah, Jen.
I don't know why I keep messing up your name.
You forget shit really easily.
Yeah, I'm horrible with names. All right, so let's say Jen goes back in time, and she makes a decision at time 0. So we're going to say J goes back in time, for Jen, goes back in time at time t. All things being equal, which is cerebus paribus, it means all things being the same, every condition is the same, no external influences are any different. All states of the universe are exactly the same down to the quantum level. Every brain state is exactly the same. Then J or Jen is going to make the same decision every single time. It's predictable at that point. It is 100%. She will choose X every single solitary time based upon the same exact conditions. But the libertarian free will person says, no, we would not be able to determine based upon the conditions, because it's just as likely that she might have chosen Y. The determinist, whether hard or soft determinist, says no. Given those conditions, you will choose the same thing every single time, which really means it's a lot depending on the brain states, physical states. And I think that's kind of the way I hold it. I think that given the exact same conditions, we're going to make the exact same choices every single solitary time. That doesn't mean we don't have will, doesn't mean we don't have the ability to choose. It just means that the concept of this libertarian free will, where we have no external influences and then we have a 50-50 chance of doing X or Y, stochastically, I'm going to say, look, I don't know what you're going to predict. I have to me, you have a 50-50 chance. Either you go back in time and you do the same thing over again, or you do the alternate route. You take Y instead of X. And if I had to bet Rez and say, hey, look, she went back in time, I'm going to put $50 on that she's going to do the exact same thing every single time, I would make that bet rather than saying, look, I don't know what she's going to make. All things, or all the, what she's going to choose. All things
for one thing, I'm not going to bet against that.
Well, I mean, does that make sense, though, that given all things being equal, people are going to choose the same thing every single time? Because that inherently denies libertarian free will.
So are we saying she goes back in time without knowledge that she went back in time, though?
Yeah, let's say, she doesn't have, she doesn't have the knowledge. She goes back in time, and it's just basically a loop.
Right. Gotcha.
At that point, I believe it's deterministic.
It's a causality loop that she has no knowledge of.
Correct. Yep.
Then yes.
Yeah, but if we could take herself out of that equation, right? If we just look and watch her rewind the tape, we'll see her making the same decision every single time.
But that's also an easy answer for me because I'm a nihilistic hard determinist.
Yeah, I don't really get hard deterministic either, because again, with the hard determinism, to me it infers everything is mechanistic. And I don't think I'm mechanistic. I think that I can choose things. I do have some capacity to change things. Unlike natural things, I can make a decision to change how the universe is. I can say I want to intentionally pick this cup up, right? A rock can't do that. A rock can't say, "Oh, I want to pick this cup up." Inanimate objects that don't have consciousness can't do that. So there is something to be said about a conscious being that can change something in the universe that is merely more, or seemingly more, than just materialism. Because things that are just materialistic shouldn't be able to change things. Matter of fact, we're the only creatures that we know of that can actually change things merely by speaking things. You know that, Rez?
I mean,
we can change reality by speaking things.
I'm going to be honest, that sounds like wishful thinking, though, because
but it's not.
Every action you take is dictated by the actions of people prior to you. Like, for instance, your parents having sex, and then their parents having sex, and the way our species evolved, which was dictated by the conditions for life to evolve to abiogenesis on this planet, assuming it did. There's arguments to be made there, but everything has like a rolling back factor all the way back to the beginning of the universe.
Well, that's a chain of causality.
All the matter got shot out.
Yeah, that's a chain of physical causality. But I can make a change merely. Well, I don't have the empowerment to. But for example, when a minister says, "I now pronounce you man and wife," right? They're making a declaration. They're making a speech act that has a assertive force that says those two people are now married. They've now changed the proposition. Let's say, I pronounced you and Jen getting married. Congratulations, you two. He's in Australia. Have him fly out here because you don't want to go down there. Everything's trying to kill you down there. So if I have the empowerment as a minister to say, hey, I now pronounce you husband and wife, I have now changed the proposition Rez is married. Right? Before Rez is married would be false. By me enunciating that, because I have the empowerment to do so, if I was a clergy, I have now changed the proposition to be true. I've changed something physically about the universe, or I changed at least the state of the universe, which is who else could do that besides us in the universe?
If neither of our parents had done that, then neither of us would be here for that to happen.
Well, I agree with that, but I'm just saying that we're the only things in the universe that we know of. Well, I should say that any a living thing, because I mean we do it intentional with some kind of thought before it. I don't know if animals can go through.
Well, we don't know for a fact that our close cousins, that being apes, can't do that as well. At least,
well, they can't declare anything, level. Right? They cannot say, hey, unless they're a minister.
But apparently, we got here somehow to do this, and I wouldn't be surprised if they can also do it in some capacity, because there is a slow growth there. It's not like one day we were suddenly humans and we could suddenly do all these things. It was a gradual process.
No, I think no. I mean, if apes other than us evolved to the point where they could do certain things, like for example, maybe we might have an orangutan that officiates weddings, which has the empowerment to marry people. In which case, there would be the something else allowed to change some proposition of the universe, but just merely by speaking it. We're the only creature we know that can speak that can do that. Right, we're the only people. We don't give apes the ability, other than humans, the ability to do speech act.
Well, when you say speak, do you mean specifically verbally?
Verbally, yeah. To say, look, I now pronounce you man and wife. We have to give the empowerment to do that. So when the officiant declares that, it has now made some kind of fundamental change to the universe, such that the condition exists where you're now married. We're the only species that can do that. Real quick, super chat. Got to pay for legal fees. Raw nakedness, $5. Do you believe that God's intentional states are normative? Seems problematic since he can't fail. Yeah, I mean, there would have to be normative in that capacity, right? In that whatever God wants is the way it ought to be, right? I mean, we have to assume that if there's a being like that, then I don't think it's far-fetched to say that that particular being is all normative states. It's what's divine command theory is predicated upon that, right? What's the moral good? It's whatever God commands it. Or actually, more specifically, it's not what God's commands in divine command theory that makes it good. It's your obedience to it. That's what the moral good is in divine command theory, is you obeying what God decrees, which whatever he says is good, but your act is what makes it good, according to what I've read on ethical subjectivism.
Slave morality, in short. The person, don't know the gender, but raw nakedness asked for me to answer too. Do you mind if I take a crack at it?
No, go for it.
Thanks. So I had to look up this word here. Normative, establishing, relating to, or deriving from a standard or norm. So then we got to ask the question, like, where do social norms derive from?
That's not usually its usage in philosophy, though. When we say normative,
what do we mean then?
We mean ought. A normative is like an is from an ought. When we say,
but isn't it okay? So
I mean, it can be used either way. I've used it interchangeably. Right, I use it interchangeably, where normative can be what's usual or normal, but it's also indicative of, like, normative ethics is ethics that you ought to do, as opposed to meta-ethics, which is the study of ethics, or applied ethics, which is the application of ethics. So normative ethics is the study of ethics of what you ought to do in a given situation. That's what they mean by normative.
And what's that dictated by? There's more than one type of morality, but
I got a whole blog on all. I literally went through and listed all the normative, all the terms, and a very short description of what those terms mean, like utilitarianism and consequentialism and rural utilitarianism and all that stuff. Each one has a very subtle difference of what people mean by it. And the problem is a lot of authors use those terms differently. Like the term subjectivism is used multiple different ways in the literature. Same with relativism. Same with reductionism. All these terms have multiple usages. So you've got to know what even things like particularism, or like the term Methodism, right? That has multiple meanings. If you read Sosa's paper called The Raft and the Pyramid, when he talks about particularism and Methodism, which is basically either the approach we start with what we know and then we go about how we know it, or do we start with how we know something and then we go to what we know? It's a different approach, but these words are used very specifically in that paper. But you look at other papers, they use those words completely different. So it's very confusing. That's what I don't like about philosophy. There's no one standard when people use these types of terminologies.
Well, maybe we can work towards that. To answer the question, I would say that God's intentional states are not God's foundational state. So argue from the ground up, God would be the ground of intention, because an intention implies a directionality, and God is undifferentiated, and the directionality is differentiated from other potential directionalities, right?
So you don't think God has intentional states? You don't think he acts?
Intentionalities arise from God, but God is the one and all. So that has a very limited definition of what it satisfies, and intentional can't be the supreme ultimate, for the reason I stated. Maybe I went too fast there. So yes, the intentional states of God are dictating of morality, or which one I'm assuming you mean by normative. They're dictating of all ideals. Sorry, what?
Did God come up with these moral goods? Did he have to have these moral goods, or did he create them because of arbitrary reasons, or are they moral goods because
they're part of God? They're part of God. Like the best metaphor is probably the matter harmonic. Are you a musician?
Wouldn't that be determining an aspect of God, which we can't do?
Well, God's the guitar, and you're saying, well, how come a guitar can play all different kinds of notes? It's like, well, that's a guitar. That's what it does.
Right, but the guitar can't play itself.
Can it tune itself? Well, it's pre-tuned because it's already perfect. Like that's basically the transcendental argument.
But it can't play itself, right? So it has no act.
If that's a different question of whether you can have a divine personality which can act with the volition of the supreme ultimate while incarnate, which is not a self-evident question.
Yeah, but does that particular deity, does he constantly evaluate things? Is he constantly paying attention to the universe and changing things all the time, or just letting things run this course?
Well, just to be clear, when I say supreme ultimate God, I mean the universe. And when I talk about the grounding of metaphysics, I'm not talking about the entire universe. I'm talking about what is the ground of being in the universe, like what can exist in the universe in the absence of everything else, i.e., what's the thing that everything else is dependent on?
Well, that's the ultimate question. That's when it goes down to one of the definitions of God, which I was talking about, is that necessary being with agency, right? It's either that or some kind of infinite regression, or it's a brute fact. I don't know what else this can be. There's only, in the argument of contingency, there's only so many different possibilities. I mean, it goes back to more of a Munchausen trilemma thing.
Well, actually, you can do something where you actually prove that none of their views are correct. Doesn't prove your view correct, but you can prove that the necessary being is the universe.
Why is it necessary?
And then you can prove, well, because the universe is necessary for itself. I mean,
but that's a statement. But that's not an argument. That's just a statement.
But then if you have the laws of physics, you can prove it within the laws of physics.
I've never.
And then anybody who dissents is basically saying, well, the laws of physics are not all there is. And it's like, well, you defined it so that this is a fact.
But the laws of physics are nomenological. They're descriptive. We see things. When we say, look, the summation of all forces equal the summations of mass times acceleration, we notice that's the case. We can look at something and say this has mass, it undergoes acceleration, therefore it has force. We can quantify that. We can expressly put it in a formula, but that's all descriptive. Why the force equals mass times acceleration? That's a more difficult question to answer, because what is it about the universe that requires these particular laws of physics? Can they be changed? Are they immutable? Are they something that can we ever develop a technology that can change the speed of light? I don't think so. I think they are hardwired into the universe, but that doesn't necessarily mean that is necessity. It just means that this particular universe, that's how it ended up. It doesn't imply to me that...
We don't know if it's a necessity.
We don't know, right? I agree with you. I don't know if it's a necessity.
But it seems like it ought to be a necessity. Here's the argument. There are necessities.
But what about in different possible worlds where, the speed of light could have been different?
There's no such thing.
Well, of course there is.
No such thing as a different possible world. That's a myth.
No, there's how is that a myth? There's absolutely different possible worlds. That's possible. That's possible world semantics. The whole point of modal logic is dependent upon possible worlds.
Don't we have evidence that there may in fact be multi-universes?
Well, yeah, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about possible world theory, which is not the same thing as multiverses or hypotheses.
Okay. I've never really truly understood what the difference is.
Possible world theory just basically states, when it comes to modalities, it's called alaic modalities, to say what is the difference between possible, what is the difference between necessary. Something that is possible means that it must be true in at least one possible world, but not all of them. Necessary means it must be true in all possible worlds, and of course, impossible means it cannot exist in any. So when we're talking about possible worlds, we're just using these things as counterexamples, so called subjunctive cases, to say, look, what if? Like, for example, if you look at a counterfactual, it is a what if condition. What if Kennedy wasn't killed, but it was, he lived? What if this? What if that? These are all counterfactuals. So a possible world is basically a counterfactual world that, what if the world was a little bit different? What if this cup, instead of being green, was red? Okay, well, is that a logical possibility? Yeah, there's nothing precluding this contingent cup from having a property of being read. There's just nothing illogical about that. So that means...
But then...
Wouldn't that include, like, possible worlds containing things we can't even currently imagine
as
that
long
may
as it's
exist
logically
beyond
possible.
our understanding?
Like, as long as it's logically possible, it exists in some possible world. If I say a square circle, that cannot exist in any possible world. And so there's no possible world that exists out there. Now, there's something called modal realism versus modal anti-realism. Modal realism states that those possible worlds do actually have ontology. Okay, that was popularized by David Lewis, and he has some really interesting arguments as to why he holds that these modal possible worlds have real ontology. But I'd go to what's called modal anti-realism, which means they're useful fictions. They don't really have any existence per se. So it's all just a way of understanding what we mean by something that is possible versus impossible, or necessary versus contingent, or that's all. And plus, they also use it in epistemology when we're talking about truth tracking conditions. When we say the justified true belief, that when something is true and you're justified to believe it, and it is true, then we call that knowledge. But because of the Gettier problems, they were trying to work around that, so they add what's called truth tracking conditions, which is called safety and sensitivity and safety, I believe the two terms are. And basically what they do is they say, okay, would the person believe this in the next possible world over? If that's the case, then it is considered knowledge. It gets a little more technical than that. I don't understand the nuances very well of the truth tracking conditions, but these possible worlds are also used in epistemology.
So you can construct an alternate universe, possible world, as long as it's logically consistent, quote unquote.
Yep.
Using arbitrary laws of logic that appear to not be mutually intercompatible.
Well, no, these laws of the possible worlds all are contingent upon classical logics. So in other words, there's no possible world where A does not equal A. No possible world. But is there a possible world where, Steve, is flying around town? Yeah, because that's logically possible. There's a difference between logically impossible, biologically impossible, and nomologically impossible. Those are very different things, or metaphysically impossible. Vastly different things. Like, for example,
conceivable.
Yeah, well,
you don't see it. Do you see an issue with like equating something conceivable with something likely?
No, just because something conceivable doesn't mean it's likely. Right? I can conceive a lot of things.
Is that an issue? Because doesn't it seem like this type of thinking might lend itself to people thinking that?
No, it just basically is a way to explain possible states. Right, because we have to look at the possible world semantic as, look, is this something that is even possible? No, there's no possibility of a square circle existing in any possible world out there. Just
that's predicated on the axioms of math.
Of logic,
I can show you. There's an object that's three-dimensional that if you projection on one surface is a circle, projection on the other is a square.
Correct.
There's your square circle. It's just a higher dimensional object. But there's your paraconsistency, right?
No, because it's two different. It's not a square circle, right? One image is a square, one image is a circle. It's not a square circle. A square circle would be a self-contained, homogeneous object that is both a square and a circle at the same time. That object that you're describing, that has the shadow, which gives the illusion of square versus circle, is not a square circle. It's just an object that when you shine light on it, will give you those two particular images.
Right, and then a question of whether that's not the same thing. It depends on the definition of where two entities not are the same, but when they start being different.
To a point, but at the same token, the same object, right? One object itself, right? We're looking at one object. What is the object we're looking at? We're looking at the object that has the shadow. That object is not a square circle. So there is no possibility that one single object can be what would be considered a square circle.
Just because we can't conceive of it doesn't mean it's not logically possible. In some sense,
literally is not logically possible.
It could be mathematically possible because math. I mean, it depends what you want to define as logic, but there's a huge presupposition that these laws of logic are actually absolute in a universal sense.
And there's an argument to be made for that in some capacity. Like, I don't think you can square the circle. I mean, they mathematically prove that you can't, right? So
that's based on the axioms of math.
Which is, but that's what we're talking about, real. Right?
But the axioms of math don't have any bearing on reality. Like, they work because they don't have bearing on reality.
I'm not going to say math corresponds with reality. But
it wouldn't work if it did.
If I don't think our brains could even conceptualize a square circle. I don't know what
I don't think it can. I don't think our brains can do it either, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have some mathematical existence, because mathematical existence isn't predicated on our being able to conceive of it.
But even in mathematics, there's no way to make a square circle. I mean, you can try, but again,
in topology, there probably is.
No,
you just have to change the axioms. Yes.
Well, then you're not dealing with. But see, again, when you're
not dealing with the familiar axioms that have been used for the last 100 years that most people don't agree with and are mostly wrong.
Well, ZFC is based on ZFC, but
ZFC and the axiom of choice is not founded on anything other than wishful thinking.
Right. Well, that's why it's one of those.
That's where your truth explosion's coming from. Is the axiom of choice.
Axiom of choice is not mostly. A lot of people don't take the axiom of choice for that very reason, because it leads to things that could not happen in real life. For example, like the Tarski paradox. We know that if you take one basketball, you cannot get two basketballs out of it. But if in mathematics, because of topology and the axiom of choice, you can actually get two basketballs out of it. But we know that doesn't work in real life. We do understand that, right? But the axiom of choice is one of those axioms that most people will probably not take unless you're needing to for set theory.
Cell reproduces. The cell can replicate, can't it? That's two basketballs from one.
Well, no, because you're not just taking one object and making two. You're actually adding energy into the system. The energy is used to replicate itself by means of matter, and you're creating something else by converting energy into mass, right? Because when cells replicate, they use sunlight, they use energy, chemical energy, they use photo energy. So there's energy going into that system. You cannot just take a basketball, not put anything into it, and make two basketballs out of it. In mathematics, you can do that because you're not required to put any energy in. There's no constraint like that.
That implies that mathematics has no correspondence to reality, doesn't it?
I've said that. But again, that's only if you are allowed to take the axiom of choice or not, which, again, in ZFC doesn't really apply to most mainstream mathematics for that very reason. People that work in set theory, then you start running into these complexities because of the whole, barber paradox. Does the barber who shaves all men in town shave himself? And, do you include the set of all things in itself? If you have sets, and the set of all things, does that include itself? Because if it's a set of all things, it would have to include itself, and you end up with a recursory type thing. You end up with an infinite cyclic thing of, okay, is a set in itself and it's nested, but then set theory gets you out of that by saying, well, we're going to treat this as this or treat this as this, and then you have the outcomes of that. But most people aren't going to run into issues like that on regular mathematics, right? I mean, most people probably in the live chat probably have never heard of the axiom of choice before. Which means, by the way, people, axiom of choice is a fancy way of saying, look, if I got a bunch of sets, I'm allowed to go in and take one arbitrary element out of each set to create a new set. The axiom of choice allows me to do that. Is that a good way to describe it?
I mean, probably, but I still don't know how to
You suck at math, man. No, yeah, why am I asking Rez? Yeah, I'm kidding. But go back to the topic though. You are somebody who believes that God exists, so you do believe that God is the foundation for everything, correct?
Simplest way to put it is that God's the universe. One thing I want to say real quick before I forget is I wanted to say good job on not having the word conscious in your definition of God. That will make it a lot easier.
Yeah, I'm not going to invoke consciousness per se, because I don't even know if they have intentional states. I don't think that would necessarily, by implicature, mean consciousness. I don't know. Maybe it would, but I'm trying to avoid that because consciousness has too many rabbit holes that can go down.
I mean, I think you can argue that evolution has intentional states without consciousness.
Like nature intends to get more like
that's a teleological approach or teleonomic approach, right? One way to look at that would be that nature doesn't have intentional states, but nature has the ability to design without intentional states. A teleological approach would be that something has designed the universe to be the way it is. Something has designed, like my thumb, to be opposable, to grasp, right? This is by design. I believe that my thumb is designed, but it's designed teleonomically by nature. I have no problem with that. I think that the thumb is designed. I think the eye is designed. But that's not an intelligent design argument. I don't think there's any intelligence behind it. It was actually Charles Darwin that actually promoted that look, these things are designed, but it only has the appearance of intelligence behind that design. It is designed teleonomically by nature. I think that's one of the most biggest things that Charles Darwin gave to the science community that a lot of people don't recognize. It wasn't so much his views on evolution. It was what was groundbreaking. He was the first to actually say, look, sure, these things have the appearance of design, and they are designed by nature. You don't need a god to do it. And that was, almost heresy back then, because they all believed, hey, look, no, you do have to have a god for this. You tell Thomas Aquinas, you don't need a god for this. You don't need a god to be the prime mover. No, it was pretty much assumed by most people that there was some force behind the universe that guided everything. And then Charles Darwin came along and said, no, nature can do this on its own, just by iteration, just by trial and error, just by selective pressure, just by, natural selection. And that, I think, was one of the greatest things that he gave to the scientific community. So, boy, did we get off topic. That's cool. I like that. No, I like going down these paths.
And Joey, I just wanted to address something that Smitty said in the chat. With
who
regards
let Smitty
to his
in the
question,
chat?
with regards to his question to you, why can you not then just slap the label of God on anything if you're going to call the universe God?
Well, a pantheist would do that, right?
Right, but what I wanted to get at is, would not most Christians consider you calling the universe God blasphemy?
Probably.
And I consider what they do blasphemy, and one of us is right, and it's the one with the older religion, so it's me.
I could also say both of you are wrong.
But you have no evidentiary basis on which to assert that. Sorry, Steve.
That's okay. Are you a Zositarian? Because that's like the oldest, isn't it?
Well, the oldest religion has no name because there was nobody there to name it, but it's the eternal one, and it endures because it's scientific and it can adapt and is the bomb. So there's only one metaphysical absolute. So this is the "a rose by any other name would smell as sweet." Mm-hmm. Shit metaphor. No offense, actually, it's not the worst metaphor I've ever heard. It's not saying much, but anyway, there's only one metaphysical absolute. You want to say there's two, and I'm going to say, well, there's only one. And then these arguments have actually persisted for quite a long time in India.
I hold there's a lot of metaphysical absolutes.
What is the nature of the primary distinction between the first and the second? And those things are never going to be resolved. Not this lifetime, not next, or forever on. But whatever. I'm just trying to make the actual questions a little more clear.
What do you
not
think?
Trying to say people need to jump on the bandwagon of a particular worldview. But I do believe that there's really only one metaphysical absolute by necessity.
And that's
I would
the
say
universe?
definition, but
is that the universe?
I don't believe in other universes.
Okay, so when we talk about possible world theory, this universe that we exist in, our reality, is called the extant possible world. It's the one that's been actualized. So the actualized possible world, the extant one that we exist in, it is called indexical. That the one that you're in is the only one that exists that has been actualized, according to modal anti-realism. So we exist in the only universe in that sense. There's no other actualized universe. So when I talk about the universe, I'm talking about this particular possible world, or you can include all of them if you want. Usually the universe includes all possible worlds, but I'm going to just stick with the one we're in, the actualized one. Do you believe that God is synonymous with the universe? That the universe is God, but it's it does have some kind of awareness, like a panpsychism?
Well, minus the awareness part, I would say the first bit of what you said, minus the awareness part, is a necessary definition, but not a sufficient one.
Okay.
And when I say I'm a pantheist, I'm saying, God's universe would be your simplest possible explanation of the beliefs, so it could be significantly more complex if people were interested, but it's against the tradition of proselytize type thing. So really, to make it clear, it's not my intention.
Oh, okay. So
thank you for the question.
Yeah. So I mean, I can tell you tend to pantheism. Do you tend to panpsychism too?
I feel pantheism implies panpsychism, but that's only within the way English defines the term consciousness. If we were in I hate to now invoke an alternate planet here.
No, I'm not going to give you much pushback on that. I think pantheism heavily implies panpsychism to some degree.
Hello.
In this language right now, yes, but in another language, theoretically, I just want to put an asterisk. In another time, in another language, in another set of word forms, maybe not.
Maybe, yeah, that's fine. Clear. You know, I mean, I don't have a problem with panpsychism. I think it's an interesting topic. Hey, Athena.
Hey, well, okay. The reason why I asked this is Zola, interesting. Somebody I met recently is because you sound exactly like her. And when you said the name of not you, Jennifer over here, Church of Empathy, like one of the craziest people I've met.
I like the name Church of Entropy. Well, it's funny. Like I said, I was supposed to have a discussion with her. James wanted me to on Modern Day Debate, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. I'll check out her channel. Again, it has some like interesting stuff, but I was like, I don't really want to debate. I'll happy to talk with her. I like these topics, but I'm not into the adversarial nature of the debate anymore. That used to be, obviously. I mean, shit, you've been around for 6 years, Athena. We've had many iterations. I'm just not into that adversarial approach anymore.
More like over 4 years. By the way, thank you for introducing me to the community, you fucker.
Well, you don't come around that much. Yeah, but
yeah, I don't know. I've just been doing my own thing.
Good. Good. Well, we got a lot going on. With obviously bunch of legal stuff. I'm going back to work. I moved. I had a lot of stuff that have been changing.
Oh, so you're out of the closet.
Yeah,
you're out of the closet, right?
Well, that was actually a room. That was never a closet.
Everyone's been shitting on you for years.
I thought that was hilarious. People were like, "Oh, that's a closet." I'm like, "No, that's actually the landlord's brother room. They made it for a room just for him, and it was a soundproof." I put that acoustic stuff. Well, not acoustic stuff. Styrofoam paneling all around, and so I made a great little office to broadcast from. There's no reverb, and I was like, yeah, I'll live in here. I mean, shit, it's nice.
I don't know. Well, I'm glad.
It was never a closet, though. I think these guys are just. Well, they'll find anything to try to.
Come on, I'm just joshing you. It's just one of those things where I hear Steve lives in a closet.
Yeah, well, I got it. It's an actual house. It's a house in LA County.
And don't feel sorry for Steve. He brought that one on himself.
I bring everything on myself. I'm like, look, if shitlords want to find things to mock, let them. They're going to find things regardless. So I don't really care. Waste of my time.
But it's very interesting. Panpsychism. That to me that's fascinating because it implies my cell phone has a conscience.
Yeah.
Like the cup has a conscience.
It's not that far-fetched, though. It's not woo-woo. There are some actual philosophical reasonings behind it. Now, do I think that everything has a conscience? No, but the thought process behind it, by the argument, is very interesting.
I mean, if you want your mind blown even more, excuse me, if you want your mind blown even more, I've had this hypothesis. I don't like to using the word theory, but hypothesis for years, to where the human mind is actually, it's actually a pocket dimension. You know what I mean? This is. Let me start again. This is how the mind is able to create dreams, right? Because nothing, as far as I know, nothing in physics says that pocket dimensions can't exist.
I have no qualms with pocket dimensions. In fact, wouldn't they have to exist on in string theory? There's some capacity?
I think they have to exist. So okay. So if there are actually 11 dimensions,
they're all wrapped up.
Yeah. Couldn't one make the cake? Couldn't one make the case? That the other seven, or our mind. I don't know. It's the really, higher one. Really weird to put into words, but yeah.
I'm not sure on string theory, but on multiverse theory, right? When you have a fourth level multiverse, it basically is every mathematical possibility and even ideas. So it's basically everything. And I think there's something similar in string theory. When you reach 12 or 13 different dimensions, it's now anything that's possible is there. It allows for anything. So
to me, I just find it very interesting, the possibility that our minds, our minds could just be like a, like a pocket dimension, like the interactions between our neurons.
So I got in my
I mean?
headspace, I got my own little pocket dimension, and in your headspace, you have a pocket dimension, and we kind of just like.
But it makes sense when you.
Yeah,
well, but it makes
what
sense.
dimension are we meeting in? So I've got my own.
Well, can I talk, Steve?
Well, no, you can't. You're having problems with it today more than usual. Apparently not.
Can I talk, Steve? I mean, I never come on your channel, okay? And I'm usually not this talkative. So come on, let me talk.
Go nuts.
Okay. When you really think about it, okay, my mind, my mind is separate from your mind. The only way that we know what's in our mind is if we talk about it. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you know what I mean? I'm here talking about this, right? So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, your mind is epistemically off limits to mine. I cannot sense your quality. I cannot experience your experiences. Right. I just assume that your mind is processing stuff and is a conscious, sapient, individual with their own sense of sense data.
Think about how insane this is. I've thought about this for years. I got nothing but time but to think. It's like some minds, some minds, seem to be more expanded than others. And what I mean by that is that you've dealt with a lot of people throughout your life, right? I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure you came across a lot of small-minded people who couldn't see the bigger picture of something. You know what I mean?
Frequently.
Yeah. So that's to me that's amazing. You know what I mean?
That's called genetics plus education or lack thereof equals dumb person.
Well, you're not wrong. Everything is right. A lot of it is genetics, but environmental. The two of them are intertwined. You know what I mean? Like you could have you could have genetics. Oh, and that's also something else. I remember I read about how, okay, what did they do? They had chimps, the Neanderthals, and us to where all three of us had similar genes, but humans had 262 genes extra for self-awareness.
Well, I mean, I do think that our consciousness is heavily dependent upon genetics. I mean, I think that this is.
I mean, literally everything is.
But I haven't looked at biology and genetics in a few years, so I'm pretty rusty when it comes to that particular topic. But I do believe that our brains, because it produces the most amount of wattage in our body, considerably is the amount of power is from brain that we needed. So I think that when our brains got more energy, we got more food like cooking, more ability to process foods more efficiently. The brain was able to expand, get more neurons, and I think that led to more of an emergence of this more self-awareness and sentience and sapience of humans, that we were self-aware, that it was because of evolution. If you took a creature millions of years ago, long before humans, well, I should say 100 million years ago, because humans have been around a few million years, but let's say 100 million years ago when we weren't around, that whatever that precursor was didn't have the same self-awareness that we have now. So it had to be through evolutionary processes, and I think it's because the mind has more energy and more ability to do that based upon genetics. Yeah.
But God damn it, Steve. Jesus Christ, I keep calling people different names. Steve, what's true for us, it's also true for any other species on the planet. So what makes us different? You know what I mean? Because I've actually read a book. They actually read a book a while ago. I need to get back into reading it, called The Curiosity Gene, to where it tried to. I feel like I'm dominating the call.
No, go ahead. You want to talk?
To where the guy tried to pinpoint the smoking gun, where that caused our minds to expand.
Yep.
He went through a lot of stuff saying, okay, well, this is true for humans, but it's also true for other species. So what separates us from other animals?
It can't be one specific gene. It has to be an interplay of genetics. I mean, one thing that we know from genetics is that one gene affects the expression of multiple different genes, right? I mean, there's gene clusters, and there's a huge amount of interrelationship between, what one gene does as far as it can help regulate some other kind of protein encoding or whatever, mRNA coding or something.
Yeah, and this is where the fascinating subject or field of epigenetics comes in. I came across the epigenetics like a couple of years ago, and I've been in love with it ever since.
Yeah, I think that creationists, though, I think they loved throwing, and I know you're not doing that, but I hate when creationists throw out the term epigenetics and they really don't even know what it means.
Trust me, I get what you mean.
Just because it's something that is not sequenced, it's not in the DNA itself, it's not because of the nucleotide sequence, it's basically the methylation on the DNA, right? So you have a methyl group that's on there.
It's a control mechanism. It's like a control mechanism that controls how well the gene is expressed.
Right. Well, Well, one, you have the methylization on the DNA, and also you have the histone, which the DNA will wrap around, and then you have the methylization and acetylation of that, which has caused the DNA to be wound up, tight, or be elongated. Yeah. So if it's real tight on the histone, it's not going to be expressed as much as if it's real loose.
Well, exactly.
These are all epigenetic factors. Again, I'm not a biologist, so take it for a grain of salt.
Speed is. God damn it! Why the hell do I call you Speed? Sorry, he's
somebody. Man, I've only had coffee. Damn, dude. I'm not cracked out. I'm only drinking coffee, man.
No. I know. No. Speed.
Some people call him Step.
Well, no. Red. Okay, Red
is trying to be funny today.
Well, no. Okay, look. Speed. Speed is the name of somebody. I know. His name is. He goes by Answers in Atheism now, but his name used to be Speed of Sound of Gravity.
I think I know that. I think I know that guy on Twitter. Answers is he a lacktheist?
I'm not sure what the fuck he is. He says he's a Buddhist, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'd call that a lacktheist.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so many people that name atheist on Twitter that know nothing about atheism. It's driving me freaking crazy. And then they try to correct me like I'm some kind of idiot. I'm like, bro, look, man, I am no expert in these topics, but I like them and I talk about them and I read enough about them to have a cursory understanding of them, at least an entry level.
Right,
but they're not even at that. They're not even at that. They know shit from Shinola about atheism, trying to explain to other people what atheism is. It's like, dude, have you ever read about atheism? What the hell?
But I want to get back. I know this is your show, but I want to get back into
open hang.
I want to get back into epigenetics because what the interesting thing is that they actually found that the epigenetic factors might be the cause in a lot of psychiatric conditions, right? Schizophrenia, dyslexia. Mental retardation, which makes sense when you think about it, because if you have a system that controls gene expression, how well those genes are expressed would affect how well proteins are formed.
Yeah, that's called neo-Lamarckism, by the way. I mean, the neo-Lamarckism approach is that
I don't know if I would call it neo-Lamarckism. There is something to it hold on. There is something to it to where they have noticed where like some epigenetic changes have transcended generations.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then that's fine.
I don't know.
The thing is, it's not necessarily a phenotype being transmitted through the germline, but we do recognize that there are epigenetic factors that will continue for a generation or two, or even three sometimes. And those factors, if you really think about it, shouldn't really be transmitted that way because they're not sequenced in the DNA. They're above the DNA. They're the methylation groups. But that's why I think that people that have a lot of methylization, from what I understand, are more prone to certain issues, more
right. But that's the right. But
yeah.
But that's the point, right? It's due to the nature of epigenetics, sometimes you get methylation. You get methylation that transcends generations. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and as Smitty points out, Lamarck was about phenotypes, right? But that's what I'm saying. So that's why I call it neo-Lamarck, because even though it's not a phenotypical trait that's being promulgated through the germline, it is something that is non-sequential, that is being, inherited by descendants and future generations, which 30, 40 years ago, they probably would have poo-pooed on. They probably would have said no.
Yeah, and this is why, this is why you always hear like somebody has a predisposition to breast cancer or predisposition.
That's usually a gene, right? There's a specific gene for breast cancer that if they have it, there's a very high chance of development.
Right.
But, yeah.
But also like what I find fascinating is that epigenetics and how genes are expressed also explains cognitive functioning, right? You know what I mean? It would explain why some people are more intelligent than others, and why some people are just really. Can I say the R word on here?
Yeah, because I think that word is perfectly fine to be used in context of what the discussion is, and has nothing to do with demeaning people.
Okay, really retarded. There,
yeah, I have no problem with that word. Matter of fact, I think it's hilarious when people try to make issue out of something when there's a word that describes something that's not. You're not saying it about a specific person, right? In the military, when we talk about fluid theory, and you have a restriction in the pipe, like for example, when you have what's called a venturi meter. A venturi meter will have 2 points in the pipe, and if you have a point in the pipe where it's narrowed, there's a restriction. There'll be a pressure drop based on Bernoulli's equation, right, for kinetic energy and potential energy. So you can figure out exactly based upon your volumetric flow rate if there's going to be a higher kinetic energy here, what the pressure drop is going to be, because you have a pressure drop across that restriction, and that pressure drop goes from potential energy to kinetic energy. So you have a huge pressure drop there. And so that's called retarding the flow, or you have flow retardation. That's the term. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not insulting anybody by using a specific term in a way that. Started. So the same thing when that organization, the Atheist Alliance, had said they thought religion retards progress. I think that was a very appropriate use of the term. I didn't have a problem with that. It was the people that were making hay about that. It's like, who are you offended by? Who are you white knighting here?
Well, here's the thing. The word retard means to slow, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I get people's point where you say slows down, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, but there's a difference between insulting somebody with a word and using a word which describes something that we were trying to convey a concept. If I want to describe to you water going from a higher potential to a lower potential, thus increases kinetic energy, the proper way to describe that in fluid theory is flow retardation, because you're restricting it.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, that makes sense in that concept, flow retardation, or slowing down the flow, which I don't know. But besides the point. Now another interesting thing I found out while looking into epigenetics is that some epigenetic factors can be reversed. You know what I mean? Like they've actually done studies on people with PTSD, and I mean I could send you something on Twitter about it. It's on Psychology Today. But they've noticed they've noticed that people with PTSD had like a certain section of the DNA methylated after some counseling and all that.
I don't doubt that at all. I don't doubt that at all. Matter of fact, I read something a long time ago remember way back when, dude, when we were really into the biology stuff. I mean, we had Ruhif talking about the genetics.
It all seems so long ago.
That was a different.
Young and happy, don't you? Sorry.
That was back when.
Singing mood.
That was back when where we didn't fully recognize the people that we were associating with were the shitlords that they were, but.
Freudian slip on your part.
We yes. Well, no, I did. You still hung out with them for quite some time. Then you finally said, "Fuck these guys. These guys are assholes." But the methylization, I had read somewhere that an increase in methylization for DNA can actually lead to obesity as well. Now,
well, yeah,
I don't know the biology behind that.
Also, I actually, my mom smoked when she was pregnant with me, right? Now, obviously, I'm not using this as an excuse. I'm not using this as an excuse. Not using this excuse not to take care of myself. But from what I've read, is that if a woman smokes while she's pregnant, that may actually cause issue for for the offspring. The offspring may have trouble controlling their anger. May have trouble maintaining weight. Again, not using this as an excuse. Showing what the research says.
Yeah, no, I think that a lot of it is inherited, and obviously if parents drink a lot, it's going to affect the children, and cause problems throughout their life.
Thank God, mine smoked. Thank God she didn't drink. For that CG man. I think he was
fetal alcohol syndrome. I don't know whether he has that or not, but people have been questioning that for years. But
I know.
I know that my baby's mama did not smoke or drink when she was pregnant. She picked up smoking again. I quit smoking 6 years ago this December. Yay! Proud of me.
You want to know the most fucked up part? She stopped smoking when pregnant with my sister. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. Okay, when you were pregnant with me,
not for you, but
smoked.
for her. Well, I don't know how people afford it. Smokes here like $8 a pack. I'm like, you got to be kidding, man. There's no possible way would I pay $8 for a cigarette pack. I mean, when I was smoking, they were $4.50, and that was expensive.
Well, I mean,
the cheaper ones for like $3 or something, but $8 a pack to $10 a pack. Who the hell would? That's insanity. I don't miss smoking. I mean, I do kind of in some ways, but I don't miss it where I'd ever start up again. But let me ask. I got a question for Jen. They were talking about evolution in the live chat there. What was your position on evolution?
I'm sorry for taking up 3 hours.
Jen?
Go ahead.
Is she still here? I think she's still here.
Yeah, I'm here. What was the question?
Yeah. Yep, there she is.
What was the question? Sorry, about evolution?
Yeah. What's your position on evolution? Because they're talking about in the live chat.
I agree that we're subject to the laws of physics.
I'm sorry,
there was definitely a progression. I don't deny any fossil evidence that's valid.
So you accept the Earth is 4.5 billion years old?
That is what the evidence suggests. That is being right depends on radiometric dating being right, which I think is further substantiated by the fact that all planets in our solar system are within a pretty small delta the same age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think radiometric dating works. There's so many different types, and they all have a consilience. But I mean,
I guess I'm that certain. So it would be up there in the most certain things.
But do you think humans evolved from lesser creatures? I mean, do you think that we are special creation, or do you think we evolved from other members of the great ape clade or group?
Like, are you asking if I think God mixed us together, or in a kitchen?
Well, I mean, I'm asking. There's a couple different ways. It's like theistic evolution, where God created evolution, and we were just the byproduct of the end result of what He wanted. Or there's the special creation, where at some point there was apes, and then God said, "I'm going to have an ensoulment, and I'm going to make you man." That was one way of looking at it. Or that God had nothing to do with it. We exist because of biological changes over the last 4.5 billion years, and we just, what came out. If things had been different, it would have been a completely different creature on this planet that's not human.
No, I didn't say that in my last life. I said the opposite of that in my last life. I said there was humans on other planets, because that's like the Platonic argument that it's a latent archetype in the universe, and it would be discovered eventually through force of microstate permeation, which is a fundamental governing principle of the universe, aka entropy, right? Super heady. I mean, the combo's already so far in the weeds. I don't think we'll.
Well, I mean, entropy is based on. I mean, you can make an argument for microstates. Entropy can be defined by the Boltzmann constant times your microstates, omega. That's one of the things.
If we can find the microstates for a system, we can solve it exactly.
Yeah, no.
So your free will question, the answer to that is microstates. It's just how do we phrase it so that it's actually makes sense to us.
I'm fine with that. But my question is actually, how can humans exist on another planet? Because humans are developmental through a evolutionary line. Evolution on another planet would have been completely different. There could not have been possible for humans to evolve on any other planet. It's not. There's no way evolutionary can be possible, because our existence, our phylogeny, is what it is. And on another planet, it's going to be completely different. Whatever exists, even if it looks like us, talk like us, it still will not be human. It'll be something that's very similar, but it won't be humans because only humans have that phylogenetic line. So there cannot be humans that evolved on any other planet. Could there be life that's intelligent?
Well, what if it was the same phylogenetic line on another planet? The argument
doesn't
for
matter.
Platonism is that
it'd be a different tree.
Wait, why doesn't it matter? Sorry. Why is it distinct? Because it's in a different location?
Well, yeah, because if you... Well, hang on, I'll explain it this way. Suppose you have a tree, and you take 2 branches from that tree, and you put one on Earth, and you put one on another planet, right? Whatever branches on Earth is going to be what it is. Whatever branches on the other planet is going to be what it is. Even though they might have coevolution, they might be very similar, you can only go back on what the branch is. You can't create something on a different branch from another branch. It's not possible.
Okay, so you're saying that because they're different planets, they're necessarily different, even if they're the same in every other way. That's tautological to the definition. So all you just to solve that is
no. It doesn't matter if it's another planet. You could break 2 branches off and put them right next to each other, if you wanted. But
even if you copy pasted the solar system, and if you copied it and pasted it somewhere else in the galaxy, whatever evolved on it still would not be humanity.
Correct.
Because there are still other factors, like the fact that we have unique meteorology here in this solar system, like with certain meteors that are in our path, and comets, and all kinds of other stellar matter.
And that's what I was trying to say, right? Even on Earth, if 2 species co-evolve within the same ecosystem, they will evolve differently because the conditions are different.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
A phylogenetic line is a phylogenetic line. Whatever branches off some other phylogenetic line is some other branch. That's just...
Well, it's on a different tree entirely.
It's on a different tree, a different branch, whatever it is. I mean, if life started somewhere else in the universe, independently of us, it has no relationship to us, even though it might be similar.
You can have 2 trees that have very similar looking branches, but they're 2 different trees.
Are they going to have the same elements there?
I think like DNA.
It's not going to matter. Just changing the location.
I want to say something real quick, Rez. Your argument presupposes that the comets and meteors actually affect the course of evolution on the planet.
Oh, it does. Absolutely does.
It does.
We can't establish that at all. You think that genetics is deterministic of behavior? That's completely false. So
no, it's not. Go ahead.
No, I don't think genetics is completely everything. No. I just think it has a huge factor, but it's not. I don't think it's the be all end all that determines stuff.
It's almost nothing. Well, it's not that much. Let's just put it that way. Less than 50%.
I think it's
less than 50%. Less than 50% is still something. And what value? 25? Even if genetics. Hang on. Even if genetics plays 25%, that's 25% still has an impact on how a person develops.
Yeah, I think it has a huge... Well, obviously, phenotypically, it's all based upon genetics, right?
Even 10% would be fucking huge.
Well, yes. Does it depend on genetics or doesn't it?
Phenotype does. Phenotype is inherently dependent upon genotype.
That's a presupposition. You
can't...
No,
that's not...
I literally just described how.
Hang on. That's not... That is definitely not a presupposition. That is that is a foundational dogma of biology.
AKA a presupposition. That's what a foundational dogma is. A presupposition.
No. That's not what it is.
Try not to use the word dogma in front of her because she's not going to understand it in the context.
Hang on. Be nice.
Could you try to be more respectful?
Be nice, Athena. All right. So,
sorry.
The presupposition is something that you have to take with just as axiomatic assumption. We don't have to assume phenotype is based upon genotype. We can actually show it through the dogma. Well, it is called the fundamental dogma of biology, where you have DNA to transcription to translation.
To use the word. Sorry, but I won't be triggered if you use the word dogma. I'm so sorry to cut you off.
That's fine. Well, that's what it's called.
I don't want to have a fight. Okay, look, the last 2 times I talked about evolution, one was a debate on MDD, and that had 500 comments insulting me, and one quasi-good criticism. My friend, who I know you're not, you're super cool. And my streaming partner had a 200 comment Facebook thread where someone was like, I'm really worried about some of my friends who believe in evolution because, like, yes, this theory about evolution. I don't want to go into it because I don't want to trigger anybody, but I'm not offended by it, but apparently it was worth 200 comments of people being like, well, maybe you can't be friends with this guy because he doesn't believe in evolution. So it's like, okay, maybe it's too hot of a topic to touch right now.
Yeah, well, bring him into my chats. Are you familiar with the central dogma of biology? Have you heard it called that before?
I've taken a course in biology, and I haven't heard it.
Yeah, the central dogma
exactly.
literally is DNA to translation to transcription. Transcription to translation. So basically, you have your DNA produces the mRNA goes to the ribosome produces protein. That's the RNA synthesis. So you have that core progress of how a protein is created, where it can go on to be either a structural protein or an enzyme protein or whatever the function for that protein is. So when we talk about phenotype, we know the phenotype is dependent upon genes. Eye color is a phenotype. What causes eye color? Genetics, gene expression, right? Hair color, genetics, gene expression. These are all phenotypical things that we know come from genes. There's no presupposition there. It's something we know. DNA to RNA to protein is the central dogma, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a presupposition. You can't prove it, and it's not correct. You're essentially in the same position as a Christian.
I don't think you're using the term honestly, I don't think you're using the term presupposition in a way that.
Well, you just never thought of it this way because nobody wants to think of their own thinking as dogmatic or presuppositional. It's easier to see other people that way. But it's not
presuppositional if we can see that's happening. We understand how proteins are created. We don't have to presuppose that. We can show it. We can demonstrate it. There's empirical evidence behind that. There's no presupposition there. What are we presupposing?
The dogma of biology.
That's not presupposition. That's literally what we observe. How is that a presupposition?
No, well, it's called dogma, first of all, so that should tell you, like,
I thought you were
I didn't want to have this conversation because it's getting agitated now. It's like, I don't want to fight
dogma is just
people here.
Central dogma just means that this is the foundation for biology, that how things come about evolutionary wise. The central tenets, you can call it tenet, you don't have to call it dogma. The central tenet is that you have DNA, which is nucleotides that are going to be in some kind of sequential order that is read by transcription, where you have some RNA polymerase come on. It'll make a mRNA out of it. That mRNA goes to a ribosome. That ribosome knows how to attach the proper codon to what is it? What's the enzyme for that? I forget the enzyme. Whatever the enzyme's called. But it'll take the proper codon to recognize and say, okay, this particular codon wants this amino acid. Take that amino acid and put it on the E site of the peptide chain that's being formed. So you get a nice polymerized peptide that comes out of that ribosome. That we see happen. Right? We don't have to presuppose any of that. We literally can watch it occur. And if you change the genes, you can change phenotype, right? I mean, you don't think that eye color is contingent upon genes? You presuppose that?
I just think that if a theory is correct, it makes predictions, and the genetics, the way that's being framed with this genetics, I call it genetic determinism. People don't even want to exceed that genetic formulation, is not making predictions. It's unfalsifiable. Essentially,
why are we not making predictions?
Well, what predictions can you point to? I mean, I don't know if you saw my horrible dumpster fire evolution. I don't want to say it was a dumpster fire, but it wasn't great. And the result, the comments were dumpster fires. Mark was actually a super great, I don't want to say anti-debater, but.
Can I say something really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. They've actually, if I remember correctly, they've actually taken the genes of a fly, right, to where they have the antenna, and actually changed it to where the fly literally grew legs on its head.
Right, because they can change the gene expression, and homeobox genes can go in there and all antennas are modified legs. They were just modified legs. Yeah, so they can change those. They've done those experiments, correct?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because you're saying, it's not observable when it literally is.
Yeah, I don't know why she doesn't think that it's observable. I mean, we know that eye color, hair color, shapes of her chin.
There's a connection between eye color and genes.
Yes.
That doesn't mean genes predict eye color.
Well, I mean, if we understood genetics well enough, that if the same genetic sequence is in the two same people, we're going to know the eye color.
That's a statement of faith.
Why?
Because it has no evidentiary basis. Because it isn't true. I just
don't know why you think that. That seems odd. We know it's true.
you know it's true because you presuppose it, therefore you've never questioned it, so you have no idea if it's true, right?
What is presupposed? I don't know what I'm presupposing.
A biological dogma.
No, that's not that's observational. That's evidential. That's not the same as presupposition. Presupposition would be there's DNA that exists to begin with. That we assume there's a reality, a fundamental reality that exists that we can observe. Real quick, we have super chat. One second.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, Kawasa for 10,001. I think the lady is confusing presupposition with induction, Steve. Maybe? I don't know.
Induction is a form of mathematical proof where things have to be indistinguishable, and the only thing that's really indistinguishable is the chemical elements. Like, to what extent are humans indistinguishable?
That's not really induction. That's not induction.
Can I say something on the dogma thing? Because it's clear that in this case, it became dogma as a result of our observations and evidences that led to a conclusion based on our observations.
Correct.
So it became dogma because we know it to be true.
Right.
Thus, it's not a presuppositional dogma like you would find in most religions.
If you want to have a presuppositional argument, Jen, what you would argue is that induction presupposes a lot of things. In that case, I'd be fully on board with that. Yes, induction. We presuppose induction will continue to work day after day. That's Hume's problem of induction. We cannot epistemically justify induction working because it's circular to do so, because we have to use induction to justify induction. And so the use of induction is circular reasoning, and that's perfectly fine. I get that. We still use it.
I think
it
there's
still
a way
works.
around that, actually.
But
all reasoning is circular within its axioms.
Well,
That's
I mean, not necessarily
a criticism or a defense.
You have, I mean, within an argument, right? Circularity means that you can formulate a conclusion from a single premise for premise circularity. There's real circularity and there's premise circularity. Premise circularity is always fallacious. So if I can have a conclusion based upon a single premise in my argument, as my argument has like 4 lines to it, but in any one premise I can get the conclusion, that's question begging. That's circular reasoning. But induction is a very specific form of reasoning that doesn't give you a guaranteed conclusion like induction does. In deduction, we can conclude something if the premises are true. We have a 100% guarantee that the conclusion must be the case. Induction is not like that. As a matter of fact, it can't be 100%. It has to be greater than 50.
Like Bayesian statistics?
No, induction in general is called cogency. Induction has to be more than 50% likely, but less than 100%. It cannot be 100%.
And how is the percentage of likelihood judged? Bayesian?
Well, no, Bayesian is a very specific type of mathematics where you're looking at observations of priors versus your predicted, very specific. What's that?
In the process, is that worldview employed in the process? Because I deny the premise of Bayesian statistics.
I don't even use Bayesian for much of anything. I don't need to invoke Bayesian. I think the use of Bayesian the way that Richard Carey does it is inappropriate. I don't think you can use Bayesian for historical analysis. But I'm just talking about probabilities in general. If I say, Jen, I have 100 marbles in a jar, I pull out one marble. Let's call it X. I pull out X from the jar. Okay, and I say most of the marbles are blue. And I pull out X, I can say that X is blue. That's an inductive argument. So the premise, the argument goes, there's 100 marbles in a jar. Most of the marbles are blue. X is a marble that I pulled out. X is blue. That's a perfectly fine, cogent, inductive argument because most implies more than 50%. It's not all, right? If it says all the marbles are blue, then that's no longer an inductive argument. It's a deductive argument because they're all blue, therefore the only one you can pull out is blue. That's induction. We can acquire knowledge by induction. We can't acquire knowledge by deduction. We just kind of rearrange what we already have.
Yeah, I wanna go back to something she said. Well, I don't know if I'm wrong, but you mentioned genetic determinism, right?
Genetic determinism?
Or biological determinism. She mentioned something that caught my attention.
I don't remember. Go on.
Well, no, I'm asking her if she said, if she said that.
I don't remember her saying biological determinism, but maybe she did.
I think my messed up.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I couldn't hear there for a second.
Am I back? Oh, awesome.
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry about that. Sorry, what was the question?
Okay, now correct me if I'm wrong.
Whether DNA, what about what?
correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard you say, genetic determinism or biological determinism.
I said that this model that you're appealing to, this biological dogma model, is a genetic determinism model. And I've asserted this.
Well, hold on.
And I've been met with vicious denial, but no real substantiation to the denial.
Okay, well, this is 4 years. I still haven't gotten my stuttering.
I don't want to have a fight. I don't want to have a fight.
I'm not having a fight with you. We're having a discussion. We're having arguments. That's not a fight. I mean, if you feel if it's a fight, then I'll stop talking.
Well, I'm just wondering. I think it's the whole presupposition thing is confusing because there's nothing that you've described that's presuppositionary so far. When it comes to biology.
I think the reason why she sees it as presupposition, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that she thinks that if we accept that many of our traits are genetically determined, we have no control over our lives, and you know what I mean?
No, I think that we do, though. I think that it's a huge factor, but I do think that we have some abilities to change things. But we are going over 2 hours here, so I do got to wrap this up. It was a lot longer than I expected.
Oh, I wanted to keep talking, Speed.
I'm sorry. Well, we'll do a part 2, man. We'll do a part 2. I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be streaming all this week. I got to, I'm going to be, like I said, I've got to get some fundraising going for legal stuff. So, yeah.
I thought you had a job, Steve.
I'm trying to get a job here. I'm literally applied to multiple places, but I still going to need help from the community to at some point. So, yeah, it's a lot of legal stuff, man. But I'm confident as can be. I mean, the problem is I need to get my information in front of the jury. That's all. That's the hard part. Getting a jury to go. Look, Steve, you're right. No kidding.
I don't know. The whole genetic determinism thing. Because here's the very interesting thing about genetic determinism. Because if we posit that genetic determinism is true, due to the nature of it, you could have someone born who actually has control over his genetics. You know what I mean? So if somebody is born with an anger problem, right? Due to the genetics, interacting with the environment, that same DNA, that same DNA will have genes to be like, okay, well, we need to deal with this anger. This is where self-awareness comes in.
Yeah, I think people are genetically predisposed for certain things. Certainly, when it comes to medical things, I mean, people that are predisposed to cancers and things of that nature are very highly contingent upon genetics. But as far as personalities, I do think that we're predisposed based on genetics, but I think that environment plays a huge portion of that too. Does it play a bigger portion? That's been an ongoing controversy for how long, right? Environment versus nature versus nurture. So
everything we are is genetics plus environment.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's predicated on like everybody else's genetics plus environment. An environment nobody had a choice in, that's for damn sure.
Yeah.
And like even our choices are just a product of genetics plus environment.
I think so. I think that's a good way to leave it too. So Jen, nice talking to you. I'm sure we're going to be having more conversations.
Steve, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh my gosh, it was great to meet everybody. I look forward to the next one.
Well, I mean, except me, right? I mean, fuck you, Athena.
Athena's fine. Athena's cool.
Okay, even you. I got love for mankind.
Give a shout out to my channel on your channel. I need to get some people over here. I'm terrible at branding. I suck at it. I'm the world's worst self-promoter in the history of YouTubers.
I have and will continue to do so. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I appreciate it. People leave some comments below. Let me know what you think. Be nice. I don't need people coming in and just shitting on people. That doesn't do anybody any good. So have a little respectful dialogue. Let me know what you guys think about my definition. I will have to mention to the segment fault that he should probably change it from the S to a T, because I didn't mean intentional with an S. I didn't mean with a T, because I'm literally saying a necessary being that has the ability to have intentional states, like to believe things, to think things. I didn't mean it with an S, which again is a very complicated topic. But with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Jen, Rez, and Athena, thank you for dropping by. I'm going to end the meet there. Okay, I'm going to drop out, so it's going to go bye-bye. Bye. Want to say anything? Anybody?
Bye.
Okay. Okay, so end of the call there. So anyways, guys, like I said, please let me know what you guys want to talk about, ideas for different shows. I've got a few things in mind, but I constantly being trying to be creative of what I want to talk about. This was just happened to have been a topic that I wanted to talk about because it was fresh on Twitter, and I think it's something that I see a lot of atheists do is, hey, I just don't have a working definition for God. Then what are you really having a conversation with? Go do something else, right? So let me know what you guys think. And of course, whatever we talked about, like and subscribe, become a member of the channel, PayPal, all that. Like I said, I'm going to be promoting this channel quite a bit more. I know Kyle's hearing is on the 15th. I'm not expecting anything to change. I'm not expecting back to the channel at this point because whatever. It's just the court's going to do their own thing, and I'm just going to have to like promote this channel instead. And so we're going to be doing that. You got Cheshire's channel. Go check out her stuff, and Jay's channel. So she's one of my mods. She does some parody stuff. Jessie, JKJ Declassified. Go check out her stuff. She can be pretty funny when she wants to be. So let me know what you guys think of that. And I will be seeing you probably on Monday for Judgment Call. I am not streaming tomorrow. Okay? Thank you guys. Appreciate all that you do. I'm gonna do the peace thing. No, I hate that. It's stupid.